the job at Columbia was a completely sort of serendipitous thing. It was a sort of a piece of luck. And to be in New York at the moment with the combination of funding and academia and practitioners with both the technology and the content, I think it's a fairly sort of unique place at the moment. This is really where a lot of the thinking and the innovation is happening. So my feeling was, that this is a sort of a new phase for journalism. It's more about networks of capability. It's less about monolithic institutions. And it felt to me as though being here now was a little bit like being in sort of online newsrooms in 1999-2000, that there's an opportunity there. It is the part of the journalism school which is really sort of devoted to thinking about the future and thinking about what is working, what's not working, what are the interesting sort of areas to explore and develop. But it's really about bringing that back into the classroom as well. So there are three prongs of activity, one of which is, convening discourse and conversation, one of which is research programs, and the third of which is to take what we learn from the sort of research and experimentation back into the classroom to make sure that the students here are getting the most up-to-date skills, and that's a kind of a virtuous circle of reinforcing. So it is part of the journalism school, but its function is to not to produce reports which sit on shelves gathering dust, and not to be academic in that sense, but actually to be about applied research and how that can help us decide what we should be teaching and how we should be teaching it. Well, they take two courses. They really take the graduate school computer science courses and journalism courses at the same time, with the cooperation of both schools. So for some dual degrees you will find that you study at one school for a year and then you move to the next school. And our idea is really to make that a different experience. So at the moment the students are taking courses at both schools. It's a pretty rarefied skill set because you have to meet the requirements for graduate computer science here. Not everybody who's a journalist will need to be a database expert or a systems expert or a user experience front end sort of design expert. These are all going to be sort of separate roles, and the interesting thing is that if you talk to anybody in the industry at the moment, they acknowledge and positively want more input from this type of person. But the jobs are there to be created because this is so new. So there will be roles that this class and their peers in other schools are coming out and sort of creating. But we need to get, we need to have engineers. We need to have people with software engineering skills coming into journalism. That's, I think, no debate about it. I think one of them is to understand the world that you're working in. And by that I mean that it doesn't matter which discipline you're trained in, whether it's making radio shows or putting magazines together or writing articles for newspapers. You publish into a digital environment and you must understand it, and you must understand what that world means and how to choose the best way of producing your journalism in the most efficient manner possible. So I would say that would be my advice. And my the second piece of advice is, maybe this should be the first piece of advice, but it should be so self-evident that if anyone's a journalism graduate who doesn't get this, I would worry for them, is that it's about the story, and it's still about the story. It's about understanding how to tell and report stories. But you have to have both pieces of those now. You have to understand the world that you're telling the story into and about, because the real-time social web has fundamentally changed how journalists should both gather and report news. Well, I think that the New York Times is phenomenally good, really phenomenally good. I think that they have a number of projects running there at the moment, and they are probably the best in the world at integrating them back into what they do. I think The Guardian, where I came from, is very, very good. I think that they have a really interesting platform strategy in terms of being very open and interoperable with the web. I think that you see spots of innovation in interesting places. Technically, somewhere like the Huffington Post is given a lot of credit or talked about a lot in terms of what it did for content. It's also had a kind of an interesting sort of integrated social approach to news, which was, I think, sort of way ahead of its time. You see spots of innovation in places like NPR. I think in this market has been able to, again, probably because like The Guardian, it has a slightly different sort of funding model and doesn't have shareholders to address, but it's been really extraordinarily successful in doubling its audience at a time when a lot of audiences have been cut, and using this idea of publishing into a digital environment. I think that you see, in Germany, you have Der Spiegel, who I think have been had some very interesting and sort of innovative ideas coming out of them. There are a number of places in Europe, where there's sort of El País as well. Kind of you see sort of bright spots of innovation. There is innovation in lots of organisations. Reuters, I think, is an organisation I would watch closely, sort of now and in the future, as they are beginning to sort of show signs of doing some very interesting things. But you still see a sort of I think we're not quite there yet. We're much better as an industry than we were, but we're not quite there yet in terms of fully sort of understanding how this is going to happen. Well, two things, one of which is that Alan Rusbridger, who leads The Guardian, is committed to it. And if you don't have commitment at the top, you'll never get anything done. And the second thing is that they have more latitude to explore because they don't have shareholders, they don't have a kind of a commercial framework. And, there are, I think that sometimes sort of people look at The Guardian and say, well, that's just... the BBC was another place where there was great innovation and experimentation, which really sort of led a lot of kind of... It was certainly the place in Europe where you had the most talented engineers and people thinking kind of in a really radical way about content, but maybe sort of less so now than before. But people used to look at The Guardian and the BBC and say, well, it's very easy for them because they're not having to make profits and address shareholders in the same way. I'm not sure about that. I think that's a kind of a lame excuse. The Guardian has much less resource than somewhere like News International or some of the bigger groups. So I think it's more about kind of Alan's leadership really, and getting the idea that and once you have that internal momentum, the interesting thing is that sort of just kind of we had. Even before I was there, we had unmoderated talk boards at The Guardian, which, if you like, was the kind of the very earliest phase of that sort of openness and crowdsourcing and letting people in, even though you wouldn't necessarily look at a fairly rudimentary talk board and say, oh yes, that's the future of news, but there's practitioners who switch both technology and content. I think it's a fairly secure place at the moment.